Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And it is 80 something degrees here in New York. It's humid. I got my hair in the double braids because damn, it's so hot. I can't even take it. Nothing else will work. So hopefully you will bear with me today in my sweaty braided glory. But let's talk about the case that we're going to discuss today. And it's a hard one, fair warning. So in early June of 2023, residents of Cleveland's West Boulevard neighborhood could hear the tortured cries of a baby for days, ringing throughout the streets, captured on their Ring doorbell cameras. The baby was 16-month-old Jalen Candelario, described normally as a bright, happy, and curious child, but now it seemed she was not doing well. I suppose neighbors weren't that surprised because later they would tell news stations that the baby was often left alone, even though they'd spoken to her mother about not doing this. But no one could have guessed how bad it really was because Jalen would be left alone for over 10 days this time. And this time, she would not survive the solitude and neglect. We have a lot to talk about today. This is a horrible and tragic case, and the details of it are hard to talk about. But as always, I do believe it's important to discuss. But before we get started, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. I invite you to ditch the meal planning woes and dive into HelloFresh's biggest menu yet, with over 45 recipes and even more market items to choose from every single week. And we're going to talk more about those market items in a minute, but with HelloFresh, you can get mouth-watering seasonal recipes and pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door. HelloFresh makes cooking at home fun and easy as well as affordable, and that's why they are America's #1 meal kit. On average, HelloFresh meals have a 31% lower carbon footprint than meals of the same portion size made from supermarket ingredients. And HelloFresh's pre-measured ingredients and the 100% offset of their delivery emissions means you're able to get dinner on the table while being kinder to the planet at the same time. And using these pre-portioned ingredients also helps reduce food waste by up to 45% compared to grocery shopping. That is the best part for me because I am known to buy too much at the grocery store and then, everything goes to waste because I'm just using it to make one meal. I love that about HelloFresh, that they give me exactly what I need for the meals that I'm making and nothing more and nothing less. And they give you these cards, these recipe cards that have step-by-step instructions on how to actually make this meal. So in my opinion, these meals end up tasting better than anything I'd make myself, and they taste just as good, if not better, than anything I've had at a restaurant lately. And all you have to do is select your meals, select your delivery date, and HelloFresh will handle everything else. The meal planning, the shopping, and most of the prep. So all you have to do is open your box and start cooking. And HelloFresh Market is going to make those long summer days so easy and so delicious. Whether you're having a picnic for one or hosting a pool party with your closest friends, they've got charcuterie boards and decadent desserts, the staples for a great summer night. But they also have amazing appetizers. For instance, they have this spinach artichoke dip that I ate all by myself a few weeks ago. I'm not ashamed of it. I actually am, but it was good. It was good. And when you sign up for HelloFresh today, you will unlock free appetizers for life. Get the party started or enjoy a little pre-dinner treat with an appetizer of your choice in every HelloFresh box for free. And I highly suggest selecting the spinach artichoke dip, which is so creamy and so fresh. And I will tell you that spinach artichoke dip is something I'm quite good at making. It's a request at all the parties I'm invited to. But from now on, I'm using this HelloFresh spinach artichoke dip, okay? Because normally it takes forever for me to chop all of those artichokes up and chop the spinach up. And it's a mess in the kitchen, in the oven. And this spinach artichoke dip from HelloFresh tastes almost exactly like my world-renowned spinach artichoke dip, and I did zero work. Win, win, win for everyone. So go to HelloFresh.com right now and use code Stephanie Harlow Apps for free appetizers for life. One appetizer item per box while subscription is active. And remember, that's code Stephanie Harlow Apps. There's an E on the end of Stephanie and Harlow at HelloFresh.com for free appetizers for life. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. So on February 22nd, 2024, 32-year-old Crystal Candelario pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated murder and 1 count of child endangerment. It is a case that Cleveland prosecutor Michael O'Malley called a new low in parental care. And once a judge heard the facts about what Crystal had done to her 16-month-old daughter, he sentenced her to life in prison. telling Crystal that what she had done was the ultimate betrayal. You're going to hear those details now, and all I have to say is, Casey Anthony, move over, because I think we've finally found someone worse. On June 6, 2023, Crystal Candelario left her daughter Jaylyn alone and unattended at her residence near Lorraine Avenue and West 97th Street in Cleveland, Ohio. She then proceeded to fly hundreds of miles away to Puerto Rico, where she took smiling beach pictures and canoodled with friends and a man she was reportedly romantically connected with. Crystal did not return home until June 16th, at which time she found her daughter unresponsive and a pack-and-play soiled with Jaylyn's own urine and feces. Crystal called the police, and first responders pronounced Jaylyn deceased at the scene. When police questioned her, Crystal claimed she'd been home the whole time, and she'd woken up on the morning of June 16th to find her child not moving in the playpen. But the state of Jaylyn's body did not match up with her mother's story, and detectives began to investigate, starting with 648 hours of neighbors' Ring doorbell camera footage. It was then that they were able to see the comings and goings of Crystal during the time period she had told police she'd been home taking care of her baby. Now, I know that June 6th to the 16th is 10 days, and earlier I said over 10 days, but as we go through the timeline, you're going to see why there's a little discrepancy there, because from what I can understand, Crystal and Jaylyn lived with Crystal's parents and Crystal's older daughter, but on June 1st, the parents had left for a vacation in Ecuador, taking Crystal's oldest daughter with them and leaving Crystal alone with her youngest daughter. On June 4th, 2023, Crystal left her home without Jaylyn, and then she left the state of Ohio, having a late breakfast at a Denny's in Taylor, Michigan at 11:29 a.m. Crystal returned home on June 6th at 7:41 a.m., and this means that Jaylyn had been left alone for 2 days while Crystal was in Michigan, where it is believed she had a boyfriend, a different boyfriend than the one she went to Puerto Rico with later that week. Because a few days in Michigan wasn't enough, Crystal wasn't done having fun. She was headed to Puerto Rico with another boyfriend. Surveillance cameras captured Crystal heading out to her car on June 6th with suitcases, and then she pulled away from her house, leaving her 16-month-old baby behind once again. Investigators found a Spirit airline ticket, which showed Crystal Candelario boarding a flight to Puerto Rico on June 8th with a return date of June 11th. So she actually spent 2 days in Michigan before she got on the plane to go to Puerto Rico.
These are items from her phone. Her actions indicate to us that she is in Puerto Rico having a good time with friends, and that there is not a care in the world about the 16-month-old that was left alone in the pack and play. These pictures show somebody who is showing some discretion and judgment because she's having a good time. Meanwhile, this child is in a pack and play.
And understand, this woman was not just frolicking on the beach without a care in the world, knowing she had left her child completely alone with nothing but a few bottles of milk and some blankets. Crystal was brazen about it. She posted pictures on social media, like this one, which was captioned, quote, "The time that is enjoyed is the true time lived," end quote. And correct me if I'm wrong, but does it look like Crystal's holding a middle finger up to the camera in this picture? So she's clearly very obviously not caring. Who knows that she's in Puerto Rico? She doesn't seem to care if anybody asks where her daughter is. She's not trying to really hide it, even though after she gets back and finds that her daughter is no longer alive, she does everything to try and hide it. So after leaving Puerto Rico, Crystal Candelario returned to the East Coast, but she didn't go straight home to Cleveland. Instead, she spent June 12th through the 15th in Detroit, Michigan. And on June 16th at 7:36 a.m., Ring doorbell camera footage showed Crystal pulling back up to her home and unloading her suitcase before going inside. 10 minutes later, she called 911.
That phone call were played before the judge in court, where Candelario can be heard screaming for help.
Please, I need help. Okay, I can't help you if I don't know where you're at, so tell me the address so we can help you. 3129 West 97. Okay, is there a single or an apartment? Please. What's your name? Crystal. Crystal. What's your last name, Crystal? Crystal Candelario, please help me. And what's your number in case you get the... What's your
So Crystal seems pretty upset in this 911 call, right? Pretty emotional, distraught, some might say. But when detectives arrived and talked to Crystal, all of that distress was completely gone, as she lied to them and told them that she'd been home with her child.
Growing up.
Yes.
And then how was she Wednesday and Thursday?
She was with no food, just with a meal, because she was refusing. Maybe it's because she didn't want me 2 days, before.
Yeah.
So that's why
What?
I was scary, because I say, oh my God, let me go to the hospital because she doesn't eat anything. She was lose tiny, her weight.
Yeah.
I lose, her weight. But right now, in this morning when I wake up, she was asleep. She sleep every day 12 hours.
Okay.
She sleep like at 9, 8 p.m.
Okay.
to 9 or 10 a.m.
Okay.
12 hours. So, in this morning I was sleeping too. I never wake up. She was
What happened? What was going on last night?
Last night she was crying a lot. And I see one moment when I was take a shower, and she was screaming like, I don't know, probably she get a pain.
Okay.
Maybe.
About what time was that last night?
Maybe at 7 or 8 p.m.
Okay.
So she was screaming like, probably for pain or something like that. In this morning when I wake up, I took her in the morning for, Jaylene, wake up, and she wake up, and when I see her, I see she looks like a really, really dry, like ¿cómo se dice cuando una persona se chupa, o sea, kind of like, yeah.
Oh, like her sides was sunken in?
So, yeah. Y ahí fue que yo me asusté.
Crystal now seems completely calm, conversational. Some might even describe her as casual, especially with all those shrugs. Crystal told the police that Jaylen had been vomiting earlier in the week, twice each, the previous Monday and Tuesday, which would have been June 12th and June 13th, at which time Crystal wasn't even home, right? And Crystal said she'd given her daughter some Tylenol to settle her stomach, because Tylenol is exactly what you want when you're throwing up. When your stomach's upset, Tylenol. It does the exact opposite, but okay. Crystal also said that the baby hadn't been eating at all. She said maybe she'd drink some milk, but she was essentially refusing any and all solid food. So to add insult to injury, not only did Crystal leave her child alone for over 10 days, but she left her with just a few bottles of milk and no food. And then she had the audacity to tell police that it was Jaylen who was refusing food, even though I'm sure there's nothing that child wanted more than some food, and of course, her mother. And then, after the police left, Crystal was so upset that she had to leave her house again and spend the next 2 days with her boyfriend in Michigan. And I believe that in one of the statements made by the detectives who were on this case, one of the detectives said something like, when your boyfriend found out what had happened to your daughter, he was too upset to eat, but he said you had no problem eating. So obviously detectives spoke to this man, as well as speaking to the man who she went to Puerto Rico with, I'm sure. Now, I don't really know what Crystal expected or hoped to happen here, because the evidence really spoke for itself. She had taken her daughter's limp and lifeless little body out of the playpen, and she had dressed Jaylen in a clean outfit before the police arrived. But the clean clothes were essentially a Band-Aid to a bullet hole. The state of Jaylen's body and the state of the pack-and-play she'd been found in were more than enough to let detectives know that whatever story Crystal was telling, it was far from the truth. Here is Detective Teresa Gomez of the Cleveland Police Homicide Unit.
When we saw her eyes sunk in and wide open, we later learned that sunken eyes is a result of severe dehydration. To the naked eye, it appeared she had dirt in her mouth and fingernails. It wasn't until the next day that detectives learned that the dirt, in fact, was feces. Detectives also began to gain clarity as to what really happened to Jaylene. Candelario's fabricated story, which she initially told detectives, began to unravel.
Jaylen was transported to the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office, where the ME, Dr. Elizabeth Mooney, performed an autopsy. And I'm going to let Dr. Mooney tell you her findings herself, but be warned, This is going to be very hard to listen to.
Unfortunately, this is one of the most tragic and unfortunate cases I've had in my career thus far. So today I speak on behalf of her and her findings with the course of my examination. We received Jaylin at the medical examiner's office from the scene of her residence, at which time she was clothed in non-soiled clothing, indicating her body had likely been dressed prior to first responders' arrival, as they had mentioned before. So at autopsy, I examined the body of a very emaciated female toddler. At this point, she weighed 13 pounds. Upon review of medical records, this indicated approximately a 7-pound weight loss since her previous doctor's visit less than 2 months prior to that. The eyes were sunken, and she had temporal wasting in her face. In addition to that, the skin showed markedly decreased turgor, meaning when I pinch the skin, it remains in that tented position, indicating severe dehydration. In addition, there was abundant fecal material present caked on the fingers, the fingernails, the hands, the feet, as well as the soles of the feet. The same material was found on her lips, which were very dry and flaking, as well as in her oral cavity, caked to her teeth. She did have some diaper rash appearance, as well as fecal material adherent to those areas. Of note, the body was essentially free of significant injury, with the exception of dried excoriations or scratches to the face region predominantly, and whether or not these were inflicted to herself in a conscious or semi-conscious state while she was dying, I'm unable to determine that. Very early decompositional changes were present. This included faint discoloration or green discoloration of the abdomen. These are typically changes that we see within 2 to 3 days following death. No additional changes to suggest that she passed away prior to this were found externally or internally. Upon internal examination, I continued to find evidence consistent with starvation and dehydration. These included pale discoloration of the musculature, which was minimal. There was a decrease in intra-abdominal fat to the point of transparency as her body tried to feed upon itself for nutrients. Her stomach contents consisted of less than 2 milliliters of brown mucoid material. This is about equivalent to the distal part of my thumb, a very small amount. The rest of her bowel just contained patchy fecal material, but very minimal throughout. Her organs, including her liver, kidneys, and thymic gland, showed evidence of stress, specifically microscopically on exam. I found no additional evidence of significant natural disease going on or congenital abnormalities. Following my exam, I submitted body fluids for additional toxicology and chemistry testing, which further confirmed my gross findings that she had passed in a state of severe dehydration. Her kidneys had failed, and she was in a state of ketoacidosis, which leads to coma and eventually death. As such, I determined the cause of death to be just that, starvation and severe dehydration due to pediatric neglect. To come to the exact wording of the cause of death was based on my findings, but also the medical definitions, which I'd like to reiterate here. Dehydration, and specifically starvation, is a lengthy and continuous deprivation of food as to cause suffering or death. Pediatric neglect is the failure of a caregiver to meet adequately a child's basic needs, including physical safety, protection, food, clothing, shelter, education, medical or dental care, and supervision. In other words, neglect for Jaylin's basic needs from a caregiver resulted in her death. As such, I ruled this manner to be homicide. Most homicide deaths involve acts of violence inflicted from one person onto another, but this case involves a failure to act appropriately to support another who is dependent on them, falling into a homicidal manner. In the absence of more advanced decompositional changes, I believe that the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly even a week. This is a pain that comes from an extreme thirst and hunger. It also stems from an inherent terror of isolation, or the lack of someone present to provide that. My knowledge on the depth of this suffering may not be as extensive as a medical or a mental health professional, but as a physician with psychiatric and pediatric training, I feel comfortable stating that the deprivation of food coupled with physical isolation and caregiver abandonment would be terrifying. We know that babies and children cry when they're hungry because it's unsettling and it's uncomfortable. That's almost immediately after birth. We also know that children as early as age 4 to 5 months experience separation anxiety, with the most extreme anxiety around 9 to 18 months. Jalen was 16 months old. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom. So, as a forensic pathologist, it is said that we are the voice of the dead and given the responsibility to speak for those who can't. So this morning, I'm honored to maintain that mission. Thank you.
And Dr. Mooney is talking not only about the physical pain that Jalen experienced while she was being denied food and water and while she slowly starved to death, but also about the emotional and mental anguish that a child of that age experiences when they are completely abandoned with no one to answer their cries or fulfill their most basic needs. Just in case that didn't sink in, a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera captured the tortured cries of Jalen at 1 a.m. on June 9th. And this goes on for several minutes. Hopefully, no one listening or watching today will ever know the true pain of what Jalen experienced, because starving to death is actual torture. According to NPR, quote, "When faced with starvation, the body fights back. The first day without food is a lot like the overnight fast between dinner one night and breakfast the next morning. Energy levels are low, but pick up with a morning meal. Within days, faced with nothing to eat, the body begins to feed on itself. Metabolism slows. The body cannot regulate its temperature. Kidney function is impaired, and the immune system weakens. When the body uses its reserves to provide basic energy needs, it can no longer supply necessary nutrients to vital organs and tissues. The heart, lungs, ovaries, and testes shrink, muscles shrink, and people feel weak. Body temperature drops, and people can feel chilled. Eventually, nothing is left for the body to scavenge except muscle." Dr. Nancy Zucker says that once protein stores start getting used, death is not far. You're consuming your own muscle, including the heart muscle. In the late stages of starvation, people can experience hallucinations, convulsions, and disruptions in heart rhythm. Finally, the heart stops. The body attempts to protect the brain by shutting down the most metabolically intense functions first, like digestion, resulting in diarrhea. Just as the heart, lungs, and other organs weaken and shrivel without food, eventually so does the brain. So while Jalen was going through all of this, she was also experiencing intense separation anxiety, because a child of that age is going to experience separation anxiety regardless, especially if their main caregiver is just not there at all. And anyone who's ever gone through this knows how painful that can be, both physically and mentally. When Crystal returned to Cleveland after another 2 days with her Michigan boyfriend, she was brought into the police station for another interview, during which she stuck to her story, even though by then the detectives had a better understanding of what had actually happened.
We have you on video. Your car coming home at 7:36 in the morning. What time are we going to see you leaving your house, and when? What's the video going to show us? When we look at this video some more. Okay. Cuando nosotros empezamos a ver el video, okay, ¿qué este video nos va a enseñar a nosotros? ¿A qué hora tú saliste de tu casa y cuándo? Nos está enseñando tú regresando a las 7:36 de la mañana. Pero ¿a qué hora tú te fuiste? ¿Y qué día? Piensa lo mismo, porque el video no miente. Okay? I'm telling you, think about it really good, because the video does not lie. What is the video going to show us? Is the video going to show us that you left your house on Friday? Because it's showing you coming back, but when is it showing you leaving? Because we're going to look at the video and it's going to show us, and it's not going to lie. Think about your answer.
Let's talk a little bit about the family members of Crystal and Jaylyn Candelario. According to the DA, the state of Ohio had tried repeatedly to reach Jaylyn's extended family, but not one of them had reached out to the prosecutor's office or returned their calls. They had done nothing to acknowledge that Jaylyn was part of their family. In court during Crystal's sentencing, the judge was informed that anyone there that day would be representing Crystal and not Jaylyn.
It is law enforcement, whether it be from Cleveland Homicide, from the FBI, from the district, from EMS. These are all the people that participated in this case, and that they are here to be the family for Jaylyn Candelario, because her own family did not have the courage to call the prosecutor's office and ask what was going on with their case. They were more concerned with their own daughter.
I mean, she really called them out as they sat there in the courtroom behind her, and I'm glad that they did, because it was true that Jaylyn did have people in the courtroom that day who were speaking for her. It was evident that this little girl had touched the hearts of every single person who worked on her case, whether it was lawyers, homicide detectives, medical professionals. Everybody was devastated by what had happened to Jaylyn. Homicide detective T.J. Powell had even written a poem for her.
I was the lead detective investigator on this case, and I can honestly say, Your Honor, in my 17-year career as a Cleveland police officer, this by far is the most horrific case I've ever had to investigate. Now, I've been a detective for 10 years. First and foremost, I want to thank the entire homicide unit, the entire Cleveland Police Department, prosecutor's office. As you see, we're here, we're Jaylyn's voice. Fortunately, there's no family on our side, but we're her family. I wrote a short poem, just something in commemoration of Jaylyn's life. J is for the justice that'll be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that joyful day. I is for the incremental repetition, build-up of suspense for an innocent bystander's death that clearly makes no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. N is for new eternal life Jaylyn gained on that day. No child should ever have to die this way. Jaylyn's life truly mattered. Unfortunately, she died trying to survive off of her own urine and fecal matter.
And it's so sweet because we know that law enforcement doesn't always have the best reputation. They don't always handle cases in the best way, and sometimes they can show a great disregard for victims in these cases. But here, for Jaylyn, these police officers really attached to her. They really, they put their hearts on the line, and it destroyed them. But you can tell that they feel connected to her, and they will remain feeling connected to her for as long as they live. Now, we are going to hear from Crystal's mother and father, but on that day that Crystal was arrested, they were still out of the country. However, police spoke to Crystal's aunt, Olga Torres. Torres told law enforcement that the person who usually watched Jaylyn was Crystal's mother, but with the mother not home, Torres didn't know who'd been staying with the baby, and since she and Crystal were not on great terms, Crystal never asked her aunt for help, even though she was there to offer it.
Her relationship with me is not the best.
Okay.
So,
Appreciate your honesty.
So with trying to avoid issues in the family, problems with, if I get involved in anything, she will get a little upset.
Okay.
And my sister says, just don't get involved, back off, She's my niece and I love her to death. Of course, yeah. And I want the best for her. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't allow me to help her or give her advice, so I just step back.
Okay.
So those issues, everybody has in their family.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And then I just look for the best for her, but she doesn't allow me to.
Gotcha.
So since her parents left, she had built that wall between.
Now, Crystal Candelario obviously had a defense for what she had done, sort of. I mean, it probably felt like a defense to her, but to me, maybe even to you, not much of a defense. The first thing that Crystal's lawyer said was there was no justification for her actions.
And what the prosecution said, actions matter, and these actions are narcissistic, selfish, abhorrent, absolutely worst parenting imaginable.
Damn. whose side are you on? Whose lawyer are you? That's what I would have been asking if I was Crystal, but you got to give the man credit, right? Because this is a tough case for everybody. And this attorney, his name is Derek Smith, he gave a little background on Crystal. He said she'd moved to the United States from Ecuador in 2016, and she'd had her first daughter, Amaya, with her husband at that time, but that marriage ended. And when she was back in Ecuador, Crystal had met Jalen's father. The relationship became physically abusive, and when Crystal was pregnant, she returned to Cleveland, where neither she nor Jalen ever saw this man again. Now, Crystal was struggling, trying to support her daughters as a single mother, and in 2023, she became overwhelmed and tried to harm herself. In February of 2023, Crystal was admitted to Hillcrest Hospital because she was complaining of headaches, numbness, and facial drooping. The doctors did some tests, and they put Crystal on an IV with an anti-seizure medication inside the IV. But her evaluations showed she had nothing wrong with her brain. Her lawyer, Derek Smith, said that they sent her home with 2 medications, Depakote and Effexor. These are 2 antidepressants. But even though Crystal was not clear on what these medications were for, allegedly, according to her and her lawyer, she took them as directed. In March, Crystal returned to the hospital saying she needed a refill of her Effexor, even though she should not have been out of the medication by that point.
And there was a note from the doctor saying that she should have had plenty of Effexor, but she's saying that she's out and she needs more, and she's coming back with the same problems. So they had her evaluated again, and they were saying that her anxiety and her stress was the trigger for these physical manifestations, to what was happening to her, for the loss of sensation in the side of her body, the numbness. And they prescribed her more Depakote, more Effexor, and also Atarax to help her sleep, because she wasn't sleeping. And this is in March of 2023. Take the medications as prescribed. And then medications ran out. She wasn't feeling any better. They weren't working. She stopped. Not supposed to do that with these drugs, Your Honor. These are very serious mental health drugs, and you need to be tapered off of these medications, or there could be some side effects. Not only the side effects, but the actual underlying conditions that she may have had or been suffering from are also going unmedicated at this time. When the prosecution showed pictures of her on her trip, pictures can be deceiving. Personally, for having myself suffer from depression and anxiety, you can't tell what a person is going through from a picture, what they're dealing with on the inside. Nobody knew what she was suffering from. Her doctors even thought it was migraines and possible strokes. Again, there's no justification for her action when she was out there, what she was doing. She could have called somebody, she could have done this, yes, but when you're in that state, when you're off medication, mismanaging your thoughts, you're not thinking clearly. Her body she had to get out, and she was having fun. If she was okay in her mind, Jaylene was okay. No, of course that's not the case.
And I'm not mad at Derek Smith for doing his job. In fact, I saw an interview with him. I believe it was a News Nation interview where he was like, yeah, we were messed up about this case. Me and my partner, there was another lawyer working on Crystal's case. We had to seek psychological help. It really did a number on us. And he is there to do a job, which is to represent his client to the best of his abilities. But this is almost word for word a Jose Baez defense. You can't tell what someone is feeling in a picture. Didn't Jose Baez say that about Casey Anthony's blue dress dancing on a bar picture while she claimed her daughter had been kidnapped by Zanny the nanny? You can't tell what someone's feeling in a picture. And I guess that is absolutely true, but let's be so for real for a minute. It wasn't the fact that Crystal looked like she was happy and having fun in those pictures. It's that she left her baby and took a vacation in Puerto Rico so she could be happy and have fun. And then, yes, she appeared to be having a great time. She appeared to be having such a great time that she didn't deter anybody from taking pictures of her. She probably asked for it. She took a bunch of pictures herself. She posted them on social media with zero self-awareness of what it would look like. Did she not think, hey, maybe my daughter won't survive this over 10 days that I'm gone? What was she thinking? And if I'm understanding properly, Crystal was on these medications for migraines. They didn't give them to her for depression, and she was only on them for a few months before she discontinued them suddenly. But it sounds like she stopped taking them in early 2023, and this happened in the summer of 2023. So is that really a sound defense? And even if she had stopped taking her medications a few weeks or a few months prior to going to Puerto Rico and leaving her 16-month-old daughter completely alone to fend for herself because 16 months old are so independent. We know that. Even then, would that have really affected your decision-making to the point where you just throw caution to the wind and you don't care about anything? Not your child. I mean, you care about yourself, right? Crystal clearly still cared about herself, but you don't care about your own child. Is that a common side effect? And even Derek Smith himself says that when he first met Crystal, she seemed to have no remorse. He said her emotions came later. Her emotions came later, yes, when she got caught, when she got arrested, when she realized just how hot the water she was sitting in was.
Derek, is she remorseful? Does she understand what she's done?
In the beginning, when I first took this case, I would say no. But after, seeing her time and time again and her overall thought process and demeanor change, I really do think she misses her daughter. I just really, we don't understand what she was thinking when she did this.
But according to the prosecution, even after being arrested and spending months in jail, Crystal did not seem to feel like her daughter was her top priority or foremost in her thoughts.
And during the time that she has been locked up, she has been making plans for the future, talking to other folks at other jails, other prisons. She had a conversation, which I find more disturbing than not, but on November 26, 2023, instead of wrought with emotion, wrought with guilt, crying about the death of her child, she's talking with a friend about her trip to Puerto Rico and what a blast it was and how much the car cost. And they got a truck versus a car, even though it was more expensive. And they were concerned about the other woman that was on the trip because she liked to spend money. And they spent money on food. There was never mention about her daughter in her phone calls. And in fact, on January 6th of 2024, she's talking to her mother, who she repeatedly talks to. And they talk about God. God is forgiving. God is this. You also have to take responsibility for your actions. And God isn't in the courtroom. That's why we have judges, and that's why we have the law, because we have to follow the law. But this is what she says, because, she wants to make us believe that she doesn't understand the English language. She goes on to say, there are people who have gone free here, killing people. I mean, imagine. Intentionally, and mine was practically an accident. Because it was not like I did it intentionally. It's not like I picked up a gun or a bat or the girl bled or something like that. That's it. It was practically the same thing that happened to me a few days prior. I had the same thing happen to me days prior. And that day that it happened, that same situation happened. Were you starved when you were in Puerto Rico, Miss Candelaria? Did you not have a glass of water to drink when your mouth was parched? It is really pretty pathetic, Your Honor.
Yeah, I agree. It is pathetic. It is gross. I don't believe, personally, that Crystal was struggling with mental health issues, at least not to the point where she had no realization of the danger she was putting her child in. I think she wanted to go on this trip, and her built-in babysitter was out of the country, and Crystal, like a child, decided that she was going to do what she wanted to do, no matter what. She could have called her aunt. She could have asked a neighbor for help, as she had done in the past. She could have hired somebody to come in for a few days. And according to the neighbors, they had watched Jaylyn for Crystal in the past, and Crystal had ghosted them for days. They said she had left her daughter with them for days, saying, oh, can you watch her for a few hours? And then not coming back for days, not leaving enough food or clean clothing for her child, and not answering calls when her neighbors wanted to know where she was, not reaching out and contacting them again. So in my opinion, this was not a mental health issue. It was Crystal's personality. It was irresponsibility, plain and simple. It was selfishness. It was a complete and total disregard for the health and well-being of the tiny human who was in her care. and it doesn't even seem like she feels bad. And it also seems that she has yet to take accountability for anything. According to Crystal's own statement, quote, "There's so much pain that I have in regard to the loss of my baby, Jaylyn. I'm extremely hurt about everything that happened. I'm not trying to justify my actions, but nobody knew how much I was suffering and what I was going through. God and my daughter have forgiven me," end quote. I'm not trying to justify my actions, but no one knew what I was going through. And that's very convenient. It's very convenient that two people, God and Jaylyn, who can't confirm or deny what Crystal was going through that caused her to take such extreme actions, have given her their forgiveness. How very convenient, Crystal, for your own narrative, that you have to tell yourself in order to look at yourself in the mirror and fall asleep at night that God and Jaylyn have forgiven you. Because I don't think they have. I don't think they have. And it bothers me because, once again, there was so many options. Not only could Crystal have asked somebody to watch Jaylyn, she could have called. After it was a couple of days and she, snapped to it, had a moment of clarity through her depression, she could have been like, this probably wasn't a good idea, and I'm too far away to do anything about this. I got to call somebody at home in Cleveland and see if they can go and check in on Jaylyn. And, I may get in trouble and it may not look great for me, but at least my daughter will be okay. That's putting your child before yourself. That's what a parent does. And if you cannot do that, you shouldn't be a parent. Now, in court, Crystal's parents asked the judge to have mercy on their daughter. In a prepared statement, Crystal's mother, Ketty Torres, said that Crystal had been raised in a home with morals, values, and an understanding that family was everything. She'd been given a good home life, she'd been educated and supported throughout her life, but when she started battling with mental health issues, which included fainting spells, things went downhill and Crystal became unable to make sound decisions. And okay, maybe Crystal was struggling with postpartum depression. Maybe Crystal was going through something. It doesn't appear that she was based on her interactions with the doctors, but maybe they missed something. That can happen. Even so, does what she did to Jaylyn get wiped off the map? Does it just get forgiven because she was going through something? And according to her parents, it seems like Crystal had it all. She had a good upbringing. She was given love. She was taught about love. She was taught about family. She was taught about self-sacrifice and putting others before yourself. She was given an education. She was given support. She lived with her parents even still. Lived with her two daughters and her parents. So she had constant help at home. It's not like she was alone. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of circumstances that would add up to Crystal being completely not responsible for her actions. And Judge Brendan Sheehan also feels the same way. And he did not have mercy on Crystal. He told Crystal exactly what he thought about her.
The bond between a mother and a child is one of the most purest and most sacred bonds between human beings. It's a relationship built on love, trust, and unwavering protection. Yet, in a shocking and betrayal of this fundamental trust, you committed the ultimate act of betrayal, leaving your baby terrified, alone, unprotected, to suffer what I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable, with no food, no water, no protection, and lying in her own feces. Ms. Candelaria, you know the responsibility of parenting. You have a child already. You raised another child. And I've witnessed here before me your parents who've showed you love and respect and education. And they came here to help you, to advocate for you, more than what you've done for your own child. The evidence that I've witnessed here before this court shows that this time you simply chose not to be here because you wanted to have fun. You decided you needed a vacation. And what followed was absolute depravity. You left your baby, Jaylyn, trapped in a pack and play without food and water for 10 days. This wasn't simply an oversight. You could have saved Jalen's life many times. You could have found someone to watch her while you were gone. You could have taken her with you while you were in Detroit or Puerto Rico. You could have called someone in Cleveland and told them that Jalen needed help. Dr. Mooney indicated that rigor mortis was found when they found her, which means she didn't die that long before you came home. Think about that. Despite all of her suffering, that little baby persevered, waiting for someone to save her. And you could have done that with a simple phone call. Instead, I see photos of you on a beach while your child was eating her own feces, an attempt to survive. Photos mean something, and I'm well aware of mental health, but didn't look like you were too concerned about your child. As if that wasn't bad enough, you extended your stay in Detroit without regard to Jalen, alone, in pain, clawing her face in distress from the exhibits I just looked at, trapped in a tiny prison that you left her in. When you got home, you knew enough to start lying. You concocted story after story, trying to hide what you did. You even put pants on her, but you couldn't hide the absolute horror and filth that she spent the last days of her life in. You still didn't get it. I hear this morning that you went out and managed to go out with someone that you were with, and he was too upset to eat, but you weren't. And then I hear that you're in jail and you're telling people, I can't wait to get home. I look at remorse. I hear, except for the acceptance of responsibility, no remorse. I have to remember Jalen, where you did not. Just as you didn't let Jalen out of her confinement until she died, so too, you should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. The only difference will be that prison will at least feed you and give you liquids that you denied her.
Crystal Candelario has been sentenced to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. But according to her lawyer, Crystal intends to appeal this sentence. And once again, I say, the audacity. The audacity. I mean, she was on the phone from jail talking about what she was going to do when she got out and talking about her vacation and how much fun she had in Puerto Rico, not talking at all about how her soul was crushed based on what had happened to her daughter, Jalen, who she could never get back, who she will have to live with the rest of her life knowing she was responsible for that child's not only death, but extended torture. Extended torture for almost 2 weeks. And now Crystal intends to appeal her sentence, and I do not wish her luck on that fruitless journey. Unfortunately for Crystal, it just doesn't add up to me. It seems like the mental health defense is just kind of convenient. And I'm not saying she wasn't struggling from mental health issues. We all are, right? It's 2024. If you're not struggling with your mental health, I would like you to give me a call and tell me your secret, because we are all going through something. Or multiple things. We all have pressure on us. What we all don't do, though, is leave our helpless children alone for 10 days to cry themselves to sleep every night and then starve to death because we decided we wanted a vacation. She could have waited until her parents got home and then taken the vacation. She could have done a million things, but she chose this thing. And for that, I do not forgive her. God doesn't forgive her. Jalen doesn't forgive her. And, I think she deserves to spend the rest of her life in prison. And honestly, I don't feel bad about that. But if you do, if you feel like there's something that I'm missing or some sort of empathy I should have for Crystal that I'm not having, let me know in the comments section. And also, do not forget to like this video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, and subscribe if you haven't already. I look forward to hearing from you in the comment section. I want everybody to know that I'm putting together a deep dive on the Mika Miller case, which is all over the place right now. I am currently working on that, so I should have that to you very, very soon. And until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. I'll see you very, 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 very soon. I feel like I already said that, and I did, but in a different context. So I'm going to have the Mika Miller videos to you soon, and I'm going to see you very soon. Thank you guys so much for being here. Love you. Bye.
Would 11 don't break I got blood, blood on the strings, blood, blood on the strings.